Hello and welcome to the Young Film Academy podcast, the essential podcast for teenagers looking to find their way into the creative industries. I'm Dan Allen and joined this week by the one, the only, it's Mr. James Walker.
And we're talking about books. Dan, do you read books?
What is a book?
It's sort of thing with pages. Do you know what I was thinking? There will be a time, right, where young people will just look back to books and go, God, that was a bit old-fashioned. Like cutting down trees. That's not cool.
Well, it's already like, you know, that thing that you read on a tablet, you know?
Well, exactly.
Whereas a book is a physical thing, but at the moment it's digitized. What is it? It's actually just a bunch of words, right?
It's a bunch of words. It's true. And we're talking about bunches of words and how you can maybe use that as your way in to the industry. Did you ever try and write a novel?
Yes, actually a few times. I've got a couple of early drafts and some of them are really good and I want to write into films because I love the world building. So I'm really into fantasy, sci-fi, all sorts of things. Even though primarily I make horror films, I see that as a platform to then go on and explore bigger worlds. Because all of my stuff's a little bit dark in some way. And I also did some illustrated books as well when I was younger. So I drew some pictures of Tarzan and wrote some Tarzan stories.
Hidden skills. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, and I glued the pages together so it would fold and open and stuff like that. It looked like trash. I would get perpetually frustrated why my thing wouldn't look like quite the thing that in the bookstores and stuff. That sort of stuff.
That's so good, because you weren't having a mass-produced sort of printing press doing. But that's so cool.
Exactly.
Well,
How about you?
I think I did. I think you know, like many young creative people, sort of weirdly writing books because you've read books as kids, right? You know, that's often your first thing. And I know kids now will watch TV and watch films and stuff, but you sort of your first way in. So I think I did the same thing. I would make books with a sort of stapler. And I'd kind of put them together and then staple them so that it felt like a book as if it was bound. Because then you actually had a version of the thing. It felt like kind of like a book. And I remember my friend and I at school, we'd make them and then again draw pictures with them. And it would feel like we'd made a piece of art, which we had.
Absolutely. And whereas the boring modern equivalent would be export as PDF. There you go, I've done it. I've made an ebook. I was like, that's nowhere near as tactile and fun as getting a stapler out. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. But I suppose the question that what we're trying to address today is how can that be applied to kind of this broader media sense of the creative industries? And actually, you know, there is a big tie-in between sort of books and the films that we see and the TV series that we watch. And I suppose the old adage, you know, as a producer, what I'm very familiar with, in fact, I'm working on a project at the moment which is a very kind of big world. And if it was to happen, it would be a kind of His Dark Materials-ish, Harry Potter-ish scale story that would be incredibly expensive to do. And so we are quite aware that probably the best route in, if this is ever going to happen, is that it probably has to start as a novel, because there's a danger. It's why in the Oscars they have a sort of, you know, original screenplay versus adapted screenplay category. So a lot of things that are kind of expensive, the book is almost like an insurance policy, because that production company can pick up the book and go, well, look, loads of people love the book, and also we can tell that the story works because we can read it and it works great. Whereas if you just go to them with a screenplay of a thing and no one's ever bought it and no one knows about it, it's such a risky business. And also, you know, does it quite work in a screen format, you know, because that's always a bit difficult to tell off the page. So yeah, sometimes, you know, kind of putting it in a novel way can be a really good way in, a good starting point.
100%. And obviously we're going to be talking to Nick today, who wrote a book, gets turned into a TV show before it's even published. So then you don't even know that there's a guaranteed audience for it, but the assumption is that it's going to be sort of attacking the wider world on multiple fronts at once, which is always hopeful.
It's going to be great. So we need a novelist, don't we, Dan? We need somebody who's written a novel and had it turned into a major TV series by Amazon. And someone, in fact, who I know very well because I've worked with him a lot. And so we're delighted to have on the podcast Nick Clark Windo.
Welcome, Nick. How's it going?
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. Yeah, it's going very well. Thank you.
So exciting to have you with us, Nick, and to talk about your book, The Feed, I think, which was the book that that eventually got made into a major Amazon series, and we'll talk up to that. But maybe kick us off, because we were just talking about kind of writing books as a way in, a tool. So maybe start us off with: did you always want to write that particular novel, or did you have other novels that you tried before that one?
Yeah, it was my first published book, but in terms of how many I'd written before, it was probably the fourth whole book, and there were a couple of discarded ones on the way. Had I always wanted to write? Yeah, it's funny because when the book was published, and I was telling a couple of friends, one of them said to me, well, it's not a surprise, really, is it? Because you've always been writing. Like, you wrote that book at school, and then you were always writing when you were at RADA, and then you were, university, you were writing too. And I was like, I hadn't actually, this may sound stupid, I hadn't totally clocked that. I was always writing. But there was only a moment when I sort of thought, well, shall I do something with it?
And so do you feel it's a bit like, what do people say about scripts? It's like you've got to get all the bad ones out of you. Do you know what I mean? Like at some point, the 3 books that you wrote before The Feed, do you think those were valuable?
Yeah.
Even though they never got published?
Yeah, because each time you hope, you hope the creative process, oh God, it has to be iterative, doesn't it? You have to get better each time, or notice what you could do better. And each time you're writing something or making a film, you're pushing yourself to the extent of your capability. Very simply, you can't make the film when you are 20 that you will make when you're 46. You can't write the book when you're 18 that you will write when I wrote this one, whenever I was 36, 35, something like that. I mean, even to the degree that actually something like The Feed was, I think, about 21 drafts. Maybe 22 drafts, roughly 100,000 words. The longest draft was 120. The shortest one was about 92,000 words. That's a lot of earth that you move.
Do you do the thing where you start a new document? So you go, right, page 1, and you copy and paste things over that you want to keep, and you write from scratch the things you don't? Or are you editing the same document as you go?
Same document. But I've got a separate document going on for some things you can kill and you feel okay about it. You take that bit out and just delete it. Other bits hurt. So you trick yourself by putting it in another document and saying, I'll keep it later. And then you forget about it, and it never makes it back in. But that process was iterative. Like I look occasionally at the book of The Feed now, and I'm pleased by it. I'm pleased by what I read. It's good. And I couldn't write it. I could not sit down and write The Feed. But that's because 21 different versions of me over a few years wrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it. So people often talk about writing being a solitary thing, and I think it is, but you're talking to yourself across time. 21 different versions of you forming a little army to make that script better, to give it your brain, to think about it in different ways.
I think that's such a good way of putting it, because actually a lot of our listeners will be sort of thinking that you're almost a bit like, you write an essay at school, don't you? And you really only have one go at that. You don't redraft your essay 28 times.
No.
And so I think when you approach a creative project as a young person, you sort of think it's got to be brilliant first time.
Yeah.
And actually what you're saying is, no, you might look back to draft 8 of The Feed and think that's nothing like good enough.
Might. Yeah, I do. Look back to draft 19 and I can see clearly what was wrong with it now, but I couldn't see that at the time. I read a apocryphal maybe story about Picasso the other day that I thought was quite interesting. Supposedly towards the end of his career, Picasso was walking around some marketplace and a woman went up to him and said, "Oh, you're Picasso, you're my favorite artist ever. Could you draw me a drawing?" And he's like, "Yeah, see." Gets a paper, gets a pen, and 30 seconds later, here's a drawing for her that he nearly gives to her. Stops, and says, "That'll be $1 million, please." She says, "But that took you 30 seconds. And he says, "That 30 seconds took me 30 years. So 30 years to hone a craft, to accept that failures will happen, and that's actually part of the growing process. 30 years to get to 30 seconds of, that's a little bit.
Hold on. So what you're saying is that next time we go and have a meal in a restaurant, you're going to doodle on a napkin and you're going to expect hundreds of thousands of pounds, and you're going to turn around with that line and say, "But it took me 35 years to get to where I am now."
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think either of us could claim to have an artistic talent in terms of drawing or painting. Certainly not.
No, that's true. That is certainly true in my case.
Did you know before, obviously, with those previous 3 books, did they feel ready to you? Did you feel like you'd achieved what you wanted to? Did you still send them out to publishing houses? Like, what was it within you that you knew that they weren't ready? And do you look at them the same way you look at the early drafts of the feed?
Sure, yeah. So the first book I wrote was at school. So I was probably 15 or 16 or so.
Wow.
Living on a diet of Ian Banks and Ian M. Banks, and I've always liked sci-fi stuff and thrillers. I always had a bit of a problem at school and at university with being asked to focus on the classics, which, are brilliant, of course, but they didn't excite me. Is that awful to say? Even though
it's in the realm of the fantastical as well, because there's like a lot of people have a affinity, right, for both sci-fi and classical, I suppose.
Yeah, I think there can be. I think maybe I was just a bit in my own way rebelling and pushing back against what I was told to read. I was told to read Fairy Queen. I didn't read the Fairy Queen. I'm sure it's brilliant. I'm sure if I sat down and read it now, there'd be bits I'd love, but just because I was told to read it, I didn't. But so that book back then was written, it was very much a dark thriller, kind of like Ian Banksy stuff with a twist at the end. And it was, coming back to your question, Dan, it was as good as I knew how to make it at the time.
Yeah.
I wouldn't read it now because I'd be a bit embarrassed for my former self. But do you know what? He was 15 or 16 and going.
Yeah, that's amazing. What an achievement.
So, and there was some sort of little short story competition at school, which was my sort of galvanization to write it. And because I don't know why, but I decided I wasn't going to write a short story. I was going to write a short novel instead. So anyway, that was the first thing I did. And from that moment on, I think it was just a fascination with words and how you could put words on a page and somehow it would create an emotion in the head of someone else. That felt like magic to me. And if you honed the words and got the words right, you could create images and emotions in someone else's head, which just felt like, I don't know, so exciting. So exciting. And so then the next book I wrote, I think while we were at university, James, was a bit better than that. And that one, Dan, is the first one I sent out to agents and publishers. And I think I got some rejection letters. I think I got a lot of silence. I learned that as well as honing the craft, you have to hone confidence, self-belief. I'm not talking about arrogance. I'm talking about resilience, I guess, is what I'm talking about. You have to get to a place with a piece of creativity, whether it's a book, whether it's a piece of artwork, whether it's a film, where you do put it out there. And people will say bits that they like, and they will say bits that they don't like. And you've got to have a bit of humility, and you've got to have a sense of confidence, and you've got to have a big sense of taking a deep breath, standing up, brushing yourself off, and carrying on. And it's by that process that you grow and grow and grow and grow. The next book, good title, that one, I'm not going to say the title in case anyone nicks it, because I'm going to bank it again for later. That then started to get some nicer rejections from agents, which gave me a little bit of hope.
No, so it made you feel like, you're not just getting sort of stock responses, I suppose. You're actually getting something that feels particular to your endeavor or to the thing you sent out.
There were people who were actually responding about the book rather than getting stock rejection. They had actually given it time to think about. I think I had a couple of phone calls with a couple of agents. None of them wanted to represent me, but there was a little ember of hope. There was a little bit of feedback to give me just a bit more energy to do the next thing, the next bit of determination.
I think that's so interesting, because I think that process of getting feedback for the first time from sort of the industry, and actually feeling that someone outside of your friends and fools and family has engaged with your thing artistically is really exciting. And so last year at Young Film Academy, we did a thing called the Writers' Room, where a group of writers, young people aged, I think 14 to 17, worked in a writer's room, and then they wrote a short script, which was then looked at by 11 Film, who produced Sex Education on Netflix. Yeah. And they had it read by 11 Film, and then they actually met the script editor, one of the script editors from 11 Film, right. And then they actually had that feedback, and they got a script report, and they did a Zoom with the 11 script editor. And that was just a phenomenal way to get sort of, for kids who love Sex Education, and they're sort of actually having those same people read and feedback on their work. Yeah. I just think that's kind of what you're saying, isn't it? It's that same touch of having someone who's involved in this really engage with your thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a really interesting process getting feedback on something, because obviously we all want praise, and we're scared that people are going to point out deficiencies in whatever we do. I think that asking for feedback is essential, but there need to be kind of parameters to it. If you've written something and you give it to someone and say, can I have some feedback, there's no guidelines for them. People are always going to come up with an opinion because they want to be helpful. But you as the creator need also to take ownership of the sort of feedback you're asking for, I think. When you reach a certain point with it, here's a draft, I think it's awful, please can you help? It's pretty big in general. Here's a draft, I'm really happy with the characters, but the structure I think is off, I can't quite get grips on the third act. Could you give me some pointers about that? And if you're...
Do you ever do questionnaires? Like, can you fill out this questionnaire to give me feedback?
Well, you do that with TV shows and films. You do have a list of questions where you are focusing the audience's response because you yourself are aware of which bits you think might still need work. And I think feedback is really important. I mean, when I was sending the feed out, for various reasons, this was a book that I felt different about. I felt I'd written something that was good enough to be published. I felt that I'd written something which was good enough to entertain people. So I was hopeful and started getting rejections. Again, of a different sort of kind. Some people were getting on the phone more. I was more strategic in who I was sending it out to. I had a list of the agents I really wanted, my A list. I had a B list of people I would have been happy with, and I had a C list of kind of, all right, if that's what I end up with. By then, I was old enough to, and ugly enough to recognize that this probably wasn't going to land first off. This was an iterative process. I'd got the book to be as good as I could get it. And so I sent it out to one of my A list, a couple of my B list, and a few of my C list.
Interesting.
50% didn't respond, 50% did. Those people, I then started using their feedback to change it for the next draft, which I then sent out to another A list, some more of the B list, some more of the C list. Now you're in this situation where you're getting feedback from people, and you are now getting feedback which helps you strengthen and sharpen your belief of your product. You've got to take feedback like with humility, but you've also got to fight back if you believe it's wrong. Don't be arrogant, But you've got to have the strength. So, for example, there was one agent who was an amazing agent who was brilliant and was on my A list. And she said she'd represent me if I changed one aspect of the book. I'm not going to give any spoilers because, as I mentioned earlier, I do like twists. So this one isn't revealed until about 3/4 of the way through. But something changes in the book. And she had a problem with it, and it was to do with the commerciality of it and how she would get publishers to position it in the market. Basically, what was the genre of the book without giving too much away. She said, if you change this, I can represent you. If you don't change this, I can't, because I can't position the book. This is the end of 15 years of redrafting different books and reaching out to agents and getting rejections. And here it is. And I thought about this and I couldn't change that bit. And I said, thank you so much for your time. If I can get to a place where I can change it, I'll come back to you, but I can't. And yet there were some other things that she had said that I could change. So I redrafted. And that process is a process of strengthening and sharpening your opinion of your product. And I'm not saying to be arrogant. You need to be humble and listen to feedback. But you also need to, with that humility, have the strength of belief in what you're making. It's an interesting balance, I think.
So I think we need to maybe put some of this in context for sort of my young listeners. So I think there's a couple of things I'd like to sort of move on to talk about before we talk about the actual process of the feed being picked up and the Amazon series. But I'd like to talk about a little bit about sort of, your background, because I know that you've done many, many things in the industry. You've had lots of different hats. Mm-hmm. And so sort of almost you put on that writing hat was your way into kind of big production, having something made at that level, but you've done lots of other stuff before. So it'd be quite interesting to hear a little bit about that. And then maybe can you give us a sort of the pitch of the feed, which I'm sure you've honed over time, the sort of the 3-sentence pitch of what actually the feed kind of is. So at least that makes sense for our listeners of sort of what the book is. Maybe start with that and then we'll go into.
Yeah, sure. So the feed is an implant in our brains. As lovely as it is here to be doing this podcast, they don't exist in feed world because we're talking directly at the speed of thought through this implant. Also, while I'm talking to you guys, no offense, I've just watched a film, I've just downloaded Chinese. It's the internet directly to our brains at the speed of thought.
Which is happening.
Which is what?
Which is happening slowly with Elon Musk and stuff, right?
Absolutely. He came up with that after the feed came out.
He nicked it.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, you get the scoop here. Elon, watch out for the lawsuit coming like at you.
So this is Elon Musk, the founder of the car company Tesla, has another company called Neuralink, which is literally looking at the ability to put a chip in the human brain to interface essentially with the internet and electronics in a human brain scenario.
Exactly.
So Nick's book told it to you first.
Yeah, and so with the feed, you and I would be talking instantly. We'd be watching films, as I say, learning new languages, but also, you say to me, how was your day? Or what was your experience of writing at school? And I wouldn't use words to tell you. I'd blob out what in the book is called a mundle, a memory bundle. So there you go. I've just given you all of that data directly into your brain, and you have experienced it. So it's this amazing piece of tech that's to do with communication and transparency. And spoiler alert, page 15, the feed goes down. We have it, we get used to it. Yeah, you didn't see that coming, did you? Page 15, I can spoil it like that. You lose your phone now and you have a bit of a...
It's quite early. I wouldn't be ready for that on page 15.
Yeah. Well, there were many more twists to come. But I wanted to explore what happens in that world where you become dependent on technology. And suddenly that thing is taken away because you've given people mundles. Now, some people who live their lives on the feed can't speak, let alone not being able to remember how to make a fire or cook food because the feed goes down because something bad has happened. So we get thrown into a post-apocalyptic world pretty quickly in which there's a kidnap and two people have to get their daughter back. So on the one hand, it's a thriller with that pacey thing of getting the daughter back. On the other hand, it's an exploration of how we survive without technology that we've become dependent on.
Amazing. It's such a strong concept. And, not surprising, I think, looking back in retrospect, that it was so attractive to people from a sort of film and TV perspective. And I mean, I know partly because I think you wrote it with that in mind, I suppose. So let's backtrack a bit then. Now we know what the feed is. Give us a sense of, because this isn't your first rodeo. You've been in the business of doing other things, and then sort of the writing was. So talk to us a little bit about that, and therefore, how did that other experience inform you sort of trying to write a book and enter the world through that door, as it were?
My short answer is everything informs what you're going to do in the future. And if your life is anything like mine, you won't know what you're going to be doing in the future. Don't worry. Be open to experiences, collect them, because everything you're doing is going to inform. Steve Jobs was obsessed with joining the dots. And he does a brilliant speech somewhere on the internet. I'll try and dig it out. Maybe we could put it as a link somewhere, where he is talking about how dots often only make sense in retrospect. So in retrospect, I had a real degree, English, which I then threw away and retrained to be an actor. Went to RADA for 3 years and trained to be an actor. And indeed started working as an actor, but very quickly got quite frustrated that so much of the actor's life is not working. For most actors, certainly not every actor. But a lot of actors have time to spare and want to generate stuff, want to create. And I fell into producing, obviously with you, James, when we made Blooded, where I seem to remember some conversation where one of us said, one of us has got to produce it. This can't be too hard, can it? And, there's a strength in stupidity, isn't there? There's a strength in not knowing what you're getting yourself into. So
you had a helicopter as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a crazy thing to try and produce if neither of you guys have done much producing before. Let's just get a helicopter involved in the mountains.
But again, who knew that you don't have to ask to borrow someone's helicopter, because that's stupid. We didn't know that, so we asked someone and they said yes. So the strength in stupidity is really key, I think. And I got into film production a little bit from that, which then led into raising an amount of money for a development fund to develop scripts to go into production. That was a decade ago, and maybe one of those films will go into production this year or next year. Maybe we've got a sales agent attached, a director attached. We'll see. I've produced another film called Dead in a Week, which again is an iterative process. You learn from producing one low-budget independent film. You know the mistakes you made on that one. You won't make them again. I didn't make them again on Dead in a Week. We made different mistakes, and you learn from them. And all the way through this, I started to write novels again. I stopped for a while, but I started, I guess, in 2016. And I'm also a communications coach, so this is something else that I do, which helps me earn a living, which I think is important for life and creativity, something that's often not talked about, actually. Not earning enough. I know there's a lovely romantic stories about geniuses in garrets squeezing their life essence out of themselves as they starve and freeze and writing a work of genius. And great, that's fine. I can't do that.
You want to have something to eat for supper.
You know what? Maybe I'm flawed. Maybe if I did do that, I would have had multiple bestsellers or written a book that was changing the world. But I can't do that. So I think there has to be a sense of realism when we look at creative careers and working out earnings.
Yeah,
people earn from certain careers, and something I do to earn money, and something I love is communications coaching as well.
So you were doing the novel and writing the novel basically alongside pursuing all these different avenues, building up experience, learning about the world. Yeah. But it was almost like the novel was running kind of parallel to all of this. And so, at the point when it was then picked up by a publisher, and we'll start to move into that, and it sort of started to almost dovetail back into the world you were familiar with of film. Was that a surprise, or kind of was that your secret plan all along? Was this kind of your secret backdoor way in?
I have a second job, and actually, it's still the first one almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah, my very biggest production as a producer has been this TV series, which I wrote the novel for. Isn't that an amazing backdoor in? When I was writing the book, I've got a very visual imagination. And I think that's my crossover from novels, TV, film. I think that's why I sort of straddle three. I was writing the book, concentrating on the book. You've got to concentrate on the thing you're actually doing. But a bit of my brain was definitely thinking about the low-budget independent film that would be made from the book. And Dan, like that not being funny, that was why I originally put the apocalypse happening on page 15 of the book, because Feed World, where we're blobbing out Mundles and stuff, would be really expensive to film.
Yeah.
It was also actually quite challenging to write and read, because how with words on the page do you convey a memory bundle? How do you go into someone's thoughts? And I started smashing words together, and it became quite a challenging reading process. So the feed goes down on page 15 because it's asking quite a lot of the reader, but also in the independent, low-budget film of...
You were budgeting the future movie,
I was writing
basically.
as a producer.
You were doing it. That's really interesting. You were writing as a producer. I mean, that doesn't happen that much.
Yeah.
And its film structure as well is in there as well, by the sounds of it. Because, you might have your inciting incident is often on page 10, right? It's before the break into 2 and stuff like that. But that doesn't normally inform novels traditionally. Novels can take a little while to get into themselves just because they obey their own laws, right? But I love it when they have that sort of like cinematic structure in a way.
So my agent, when I got Juliet, who is one of the best agents in the business for so many reasons, and one of the reasons is that she is a fantastic editor, and she came in on my novel, on my draft, which was as good as I could get it, like a highly targeted Exocet missile. On the bits that actually, as soon as she said it, I knew that they were wrong. I knew that she was right, and asking me to rework them. And one of them was structure. And she recommended I read the book, Save the Cat, Save Your Cat.
Yes.
Save the Cat, yeah.
Which, of course,
by Blake Snyder, I believe.
Yeah, it is.
For our listeners, which is the book on screenplay structure, really. And it sort of gives you a very detailed breakdown of, like, if you have 110 pages, this is exactly where the different things should be happening, roughly.
But it's really approachable, actually. It's well worth reading.
It's fantastic.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's really good. Another really, really good one about structure is called Into the Woods by a guy called which is, it's a work of art, this book, and it draws on classic films, modern films. You get a good dissection of episodes of EastEnders and why they work. It's brilliant. But when Juliet asked me to read this book, I became obsessive about structure. Bought this massive roll of wallpaper, drew out a timeline, started dividing it into beats and where the turning points were happening in terms of percentages. Therefore, if my book was 93,000 words long, where does the midpoint have to happen exactly in terms of which word, and all of that. And I became obsessive about it. If a question is asked here on page 27, where on the timeline is it going to be answered? And I had this, if, the CSI scene where they break into my study and see this piece of wallpaper with all of its post-it notes and lines, it's like, this guy is evidently crazy. But for me...
But you are doing quite a rare thing, because you're applying. Because, I mean, if you were sitting here as a screenwriter, and we're talking to screenwriters on this pod, this would be completely normal, right? As screenwriters, we do that. We put loads of stuff on the walls, and you're absolutely meticulous about the point in which that happens. But I think as Dan's saying, what's so rare is that you're going at a novel, but with that same screen analogy. You're creating a hybrid, in some ways.
Maybe. maybe, I don't know. I've not really thought of it like that. I mean, I don't know. I think that if you're thinking about structure, the novel as a form is very similar to a TV series. If you think about the amount of character development and time and journey that you have in the novel, you have the same sort of journey and time in a TV series. In a film, you don't. I was in a very lucky position with the feed to have a couple of offers from film companies, and again, it was very hard, but in the end, I decided to go with the TV series because I thought there was more opportunity for character growth and for interesting stuff to happen. And I think that, in terms of structure, the book and TV series are more similar than films, potentially. But definitely, I highly recommend Into the Woods and Save the Cat. Their story is structure. If you haven't got the structure right, the story is not going to be clear enough. And if you're having problems with your story, I'd always suggest have a think about the structure. Are the things in the right place?
But I love the idea that someone would have read the feed. You get this. Someone would have read the feed. Someone goes, "Do you know what? I don't know. I really feel this feels like a movie to me." And they think that they're doing all the hard work of sort of making it feel like a movie, but actually you've written it like that from the beginning. Yeah. So if I was a young person listening to this, I'm going, okay, so this guy's written a book. It's his third or fourth book. The first ones weren't as great. They didn't get published.
Not to mention the play that I wrote while at school. That was important as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
So then let's just go through this in a bit, because I think this is fascinating, this part of the process. So you've got this manuscript. You've literally got it on your computer. Mm-hmm. You then have sent it, as you described earlier, to some agents, which you've basically found on the internet, and you've kind of gone through and selected your A, B, and C hit list. And you've got the agent that you want, who said that I've got this book. And that's where you are. I mean, to just walk us through the steps between that and sort of going into production on the enormous budget that was making your book into a movie. So into a TV series for Amazon.
Yeah. So I get an agent. Juliet points out how I need to make it better. We go through a few more drafts. At some point, you then need to put it out there and see whether anyone likes it. I think to a certain extent, whichever industry you're in, whether it's novel writing, filmmaking, art, everything is a confidence trick, isn't it? Like from the first moment when you have an idea for a story and you sit down and you trick yourself into believing that it's going to be good, you need to believe it to write it. You then need to get someone else to believe in it, whether that's an agent or a publisher. So then the agent's job is to boost confidence into this situation whereby the publishers go, oh my goodness, this is the next best thing. So Juliet is...
And you have to avoid the British tendency of being apologetic for existing during that process, right? Because you're trying to convince them it's great because you believe it's great. And unless you can do that, why would they think it's great?
The lovely thing about getting an agent is partially it's their job to do that as well, to blow your trumpet. And have a Google of Juliet Mushins and see all of the debut authors she's launched in a fantastic way, or just pop down to the bookshop and have a look at the top 10 bestseller list at the moment. There will be some in there. She's amazing. And there was interest very quickly from publishers in the UK. In fact, one of them said, what you're kind of aiming for in that situation is that there is enough confidence in the product that you have a number of people wanting it. You then get into an auction, and then that's exciting. Because
you're forcing them to pay more money because they want it more than the next person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or the next company.
Absolutely. The confidence trick is then going, what's the confidence worth? How confident are you in this? And that's when a publisher says, we're so confident that we're going to do well with this book, we will pay you this much in advance. If you've only got one person interested, then, you're not in that scenario. Headline, my publishers didn't want it to go to an auction, So they did what's called a preempt. And they said, we will pay you this much money to take it off the table now, and you've got 24 hours to decide. And you're not allowed to talk to anyone else about offers in the meantime.
But Headline themselves, so let's just, because we're going to have to get through quite a lot, I'm just aware of time. So Headline, once they had picked it up, do you think they always had in mind that they were going to sell it on for sort of TV series, or are they involved in that process, or is it?
No. So they bought the certain rights to publish it. I retained rights like other foreign publishing rights, TV rights, stage rights, all the comic books, all of that sort of stuff. So you've got a product and you chop it up into different bits and try to sell it off to different people. So at the same time, the confidence in the product is boosted because it's going to be published in the UK. There was an auction in the US. At that time, my agent felt it was right to approach TV and film companies because there was stuff building. There was a story around it. It's doing well. So get in first, get the rights to the TV show or the film now. And so I was in a very, very rare situation, as a debut novelist certainly, where the book hadn't even been published and the TV series was in production.
Wow.
Which is kind of insane.
That's absolutely crazy. And the TV series was initially, who was sort of financing it and paying for it? Was it always Amazon, or did it have another life before that?
Yeah, it's a co-production between Amazon, All 3 Media, and Liberty Global, which I think was a rare way at the time of having such 3 big companies who'd normally be competing actually joining forces. I think it's becoming more common now. And each of those, again, I was talking about dividing up things to sell from the book. The world is divided in film and TV into different areas. And each product, each film or TV show is sold to those different areas for different amounts of money. So Amazon comes in with an amount of money to make the show, and they have bought the US. Liberty Global comes in with a certain amount of money. They've bought the rights to show it in the UK. All 3 has come in with another chunk, and they are now going to sell it to companies in Europe or further afield. So it was interesting that I'd come from the production background, because I took an interest in the way the business side of that happened. It was a very interesting process to watch and be involved.
But from your point of view, so very quickly, from sort of almost like your agent goes, I love this, Nick, this is great, let's make some changes here, there. And suddenly they've got this auction going. It's bought by a publisher. And we're talking about a matter of, I think, months really before it's almost being picked up for really quite a big TV series. I mean, budget, can you give us, what was the sense of the TV budget was per episode, roughly?
I don't know for sure, but, millions are there for the series.
Per episode or for the whole series?
It was a good 7-digit budget per episode. But I don't know exactly, so I don't want to miss.
So it's millions million plus per episode. Got you.
Wow.
And how did you? So there you are. You've sort of done independent films, and you've done all this, and suddenly you are coming through this secret back door as the debut author into this. And did they give you a role on the TV series? And talk to us now about how did that? What were you doing? Were you in the room? How were you involved in the process, the show running? And because I think as well they divided if my memory serves, they took that first 15 pages, and almost the entire first series was those 15 pages. Is that right?
Yes, because the first 15 pages are really expensive. So my independent filmmaker's radar, actually came into play when the TV show was being made. So I was an executive producer on the show. That was part of the deal. What does an executive producer do? Define it what you want. An executive. Sometimes
it's the money person, right? But sometimes it's like, as in your case, would you say you're more of like the holistic, the guru of creative the scripture?
Well, sometimes it's the money person, sometimes it's the agent, sometimes it's the star's dog walker. The point is, you definitely need to have a conversation defining what is expected of you at the front. I was definitely. I did a couple of things. So one of the things was I was able to make the introduction with the company that became the post-production house. So it was fairly effects heavy, and I made the introduction with that FX house. So I think that was helpful along the way. There was a lot of sort of script notes and that sort of stuff. I was involved with the casting. I think why they really wanted me close is because feed world is quite confusing. There were a lot of conversations around what the feed does, how it works, how the hell you translate that onto the screen. There were then also a lot of questions around how are we going to change the novel and its plot in order to create a TV series? And because feed worlds is quite complicated, there's the twist I've already met, or a twist I've already mentioned I'm not going to tell you about, which puts the thing into a different place. It's quite complicated, and I think they wanted my brain involved to help change things along the way as well. The process. Sorry, yeah, go for it.
Did you write the scripts?
No, they were very clear they didn't want me to do that.
That's quite interesting. And how did you react? Because obviously they sent them to you, and you read them or not?
Yeah. So the woman who was the showrunner, Channing Powell, is one of the writers on The Walking Dead, and she was great. I mean, she read the book enough to kind of almost know it off by heart. Like, it was just really impressive. Her ability to remember stuff and refer to stuff and to try to be true to its essence. And she was brought in and wrote a series Bible. This is where we're going with it. There was a lot of talk at the time. They wanted to make something which had the potential to run like Game of Thrones for 7, 8, 9, 10 series. So she was saying, look, we can get, originally we were talking about doing one series from the book. Then came in the fact that, you know what, that if we do one series, 10 episodes, the first episode is feed world, then the feed goes down, then you've got 9 episodes doing the rest of the book. But we've blown our budget on episode 1 because you've written really expensive 15 pages at the beginning, Nick. Yeah, sorry. So then the decision was made, well, actually, let's make the first series the first 15 pages, and then the rest of the book becomes series 2, 3, 4. Actually, the way 5, yeah. Actually, the way that the TV series developed was it diverted quite a lot from the book. So series 2, 3, and 4, and 5, if they were going to be made or had they been made, would go in, I think, a different direction from where the book went.
So interesting. And I think every medium has a slightly different relationship to writers. Yeah. So, example, on a film set, often the writer, they're not top dog. You don't see the writer on a film set; they're not particularly there. Whereas in theatre, for instance, if the writer's in the room, that's a big deal, and the writer has a real sense of weight and profile to that. So, where did you feel sort of you sat in that process?
I made it clear at the start that I wanted to be helpful and as helpful as I could be. If that meant me being present and talking and being part of it, great. If that meant me actually backing off so people could speak freely and come up with new ideas, I understood that too. And I think, again, that was partially from my experience having made low-budget films and being a writer. I understood that sort of sensibility, so tried to be sensitive to it. So I was in the writer's room here and there, and then mostly not. They asked me questions about a couple of things, which I was very happy to give my thoughts about. There was one bit that they wanted to change, and I felt very strongly that I didn't want them to change it in that way. Funnily enough, it was something to do with what that agent who I didn't go with was talking about. I'd never realized that before, but it was that moment. But I was really adamant that I didn't like what they'd come up with, so I thought of something else, which they did go with.
Got you. Yeah, see you. Fighting fast. And I do remember you sending me something that I think is quite interesting, and some of our listeners might not even be aware, because I certainly wasn't, that this existed. So I remember you sent me very early in the process that the production company had almost made a trailer for the entire TV series without having shot anything at all. which was basically like a collage. It's like the equivalent at school, you cut out like bits from magazines and newspapers and you stick them into a book. And they'd sort of done that, but from other sci-fi movies and TV things, but they'd then voiced over it and created music and soundtracks. It honestly looked like the highest budget trailer for the feed. I mean, it felt like it was all for the feed, but nothing had actually been shot. What was that called and what was that? That was an incredible thing.
It's a sizzle reel. Sizzle reel. So this is used, I think, quite a lot in TV and film. It's when largely you're looking to attract finance. It's early stages and you want to give people a feel of it. Now, part of the feel of it is I think you've got to be a bit honest. Like, I'm raising £1 million for a low budget film. Don't cut a sizzle reel. Russell Crowe.
And Mission Impossible, and
you're not being honest, And what was interesting was that they looked at what they wanted to put in the sizzle reel. So there were bits that needed to reflect aspects of the story. So they gratifyingly stole quite a lot from 28 Days Later, which is definitely one of my touchstones for the setting and the emotions in the feed, that raw terror that you get through the camera work and the way that 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later is shot. But also what they did was they identified one actor, maybe two, to actually represent the main characters. So I think Toby Kebbell, they stole some stuff from a Black Mirror episode with Toby Kebbell in. There was definitely something with Cillian Murphy, who was representing Tom, the main character in the feed, and then I can't remember who was representing Kate in it. But yeah, sizzle reel.
It's such an art form that. It was amazing. And somebody would have been paid good money to essentially do kind of video collage. It was amazing.
Absolutely. I think it's a good way, actually, if you are thinking of a film, to kind of cut your teeth. What do you want it to look like visually? Who would your ideal casting in reality be? Not fantasy casting, your ideal real casting. Also with the editing, what's the pace of the product you're looking to make? What music would you put on? I think it's an interesting...
Yeah, it's like a fantasy thing. That's so cool. And I'm just conscious of time. So, let's maybe just start to backtrack towards your teenage years a little bit. But before we do that, I suppose I'll just finish off on the show. There'll be listeners hopefully who'll go, I want to read this amazing sounding book or see this amazing series that was made with some fantastic actors, etc. So talk to us. Where can anyone see or read?
Yeah. Oh God. In terms of the actors, if you like a bit of David Thewlis or Michelle Fairley, or if you're James Bond fan and remember back in the day of the Living Daylights, Art Malik and that, we had a great cast, Guy Burnett, Nina Toussaint-White. So you can, I'm not 100% sure actually, you can definitely get it on, you can buy it in places, so whether that's Apple TV or whether you buy your stuff from, you can watch it there. I don't think it's streaming for free on anything at the moment, maybe one of the Virgin channels. But in terms of the book, order it from any bookshop. They'll be able to get it in. If you need to use Amazon,
the feed, Amazon. And it is. What's your name on the book?
The Feed, and my name is Nick Clark Windo. CLARK, no E, WINDO, no W, no hyphen in between the two parts of my surname. It's a ridiculous.
So this is great. So go out and buy and enjoy The Feed, guys, and this amazing back door that Nick has found into this into executive producing the biggest project by far of your career. I love this story. So, I mean, I think this has been really instructive in terms of finding a different way in, and I think that there's so many interesting things that we're going to digest about this. But let's just take a moment to step back. How did you? What kind of a teenager were you? Like, looking back to your teenage years, give us a sense of what were you interested in? What was...
God, I was quite highly strung. Success was really important to me, but I wasn't really quite sure what I wanted to succeed at, which I think was quite a dangerous mix because I looked to
It's like, I got so much time and energy and just not sure where to direct it.
Will you approve of me? Whatever I'm doing, I just want to get people's approbation. I want to write this novel and get it published, or I want to do this play, or I want to act and get cast. And it was all about other people's approbation, I think, for a while, which is obviously important, but I think I had the balance wrong. And for various reasons over the course of my life, I think I want people to like what I do. I want people to write stuff. I want people to approve, of course, but I'm also getting much better at thinking about, well, what do you care about? What do you believe in? What do you think is interesting? And just take a risk. Make an assumption that if you think this is interesting, other people will, because humans aren't that different, are they? So I definitely was quite highly strung as a teenager. I always liked sci-fi. I loved films. In the 90s, you're looking at...
You're a Doctor Who nut, weren't you?
Yeah, I was, still am, always. One of my earliest memories was sitting on my mum's lap watching Doctor Who when I was a kid. I have weird flashbacks sometimes watching a classic episode of Doctor Who. I was like, I think I've seen this before, but I can only have been 2.5 at the time. So have I? Films. I binge watched so many films, whether it's Trainspotting, Fight Club, Heat, The Usual Suspects, all of that stuff in that 90s. And I think binge watching stuff, binge reading stuff is great. How did they do it? How did they do that? That impact I had when I first watched it. How did they construct that thing? And you learn by that, don't you? So that was a very formative part of my youth.
And were you doing like theatre and stuff at school? Like, how was that expressing itself?
Yeah, that was. I definitely started doing a lot of plays at school, and then at university, I was doing an unadvisable amount of plays, mostly acting, some directing, a bit of writing, both novels, and I wrote a couple of plays. It was quite scattergun, which I spent a lot of my life regretting. And now I think I was wrong to regret it, because I think that cross-pollination of knowledge is important. I'm always in admiration of producers who, God forbid, if the camera person, had an asthma attack, the producer could jump in and take over. I wouldn't know what to do. I see my role as a producer is getting a whole bunch of people who are way better than I could ever be at something into the mix. But I regret not having more hands-on experience at certain things, because I think there's such a huge amount of knowledge that comes from a breadth of learning. While at the same time, of course, you at some point do need to focus a bit and become expert in certain fields.
So if you had to time travel, Doctor Who styley, back to 16, 17, 18-year-old Nick, and you could whisper a piece of advice in your ear, we ask all our guests, what would you say to that? What would you say to teenage Nick?
Could I take 3 pieces of advice? It was going to be 2, but I just think...
Sure, it's like Desert Island Discs. You can take 3.
I'd ask myself, what would you do if you knew you were going to succeed? Don't worry about not succeeding. What would you do if you knew you were going to, and play for success? So that'd be one thing. The other thing would just be saying, just give myself the reassurance, you don't know you don't need to know what you want to succeed at yet. Just do as much stuff as you can. That honing process will come. So just do as much stuff as you can. And you know what? If at that stage, someone like Jack Thorne, who we were at university with, he knew early on. I did a play with him, and he tearfully said at the end of it, "This is my last play that I'll act in. I'm going to concentrate on the writing." He knew then that he was going to write, and he wrote a lot. I mean, he still writes a lot. Do as much stuff as you can. It's only by doing that you learn. It's by doing that you get connections, that you meet people. And to a degree, your career is only as good as the people you've met. So do as much stuff as you can. And my third thing that I've only just thought of, I'm talking about myself as a teenager, is just saying to myself back then, chill out. Just chill out.
Yeah, I think that's such a great piece of advice, because we all know that young people these days. I mean, we all had it, but that sense of it, everything's quite pressurized, or it can feel quite pressurized, and yeah, finding that balance between being chilled out enough to be properly creative, but also knuckling down when that's appropriate.
Let's be honest, we're going into fields. You guys listening to this are going into a field which is creative, where you're fueled by your passion, you're fueled by a belief, you're fueled by a desire to create and communicate. It's very different from a bunch of other jobs that you might choose to go into, which are more structured, which do different things. This one you have to enjoy. And you have to protect that enjoyment. So find out what you enjoy and protect it, and chill and relax into it. Strive, fight, but find that enjoyment and protect it.
100%.
Well, what a brilliant...
When you said your first thing, of like, the first thing I do is ask a question of myself, like, if you knew you would succeed, what would you do? I was like, oh my God, that's a great question. I'd love to sort of ask myself. And I think a good answer is to enjoy yourself, right? It's to enjoy the process, because I think it's so easy to forget that, despite us doing so many fun, creative things. You get hung up on what could happen, what probably won't, and what might, and that we lose the present.
Yeah, the horizons of success is a whole different podcast.
Yeah. That's actually really well. What a note to end on, to enjoy ourselves. So, well, I brilliantly enjoyed that. Thank you so much, Nick, for sharing your back door into big budget production. It's been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, and we hope all listeners get hold of a copy of the feed and enjoy the book, or look up the TV series online.
Absolutely, lovely to talk.
That was amazing. Like, I love books, and I love novels, and I love hearing about just the writing experience, and it was really interesting hearing about novel writing from someone who knows about film, because you always wonder, like, oh, okay, is it going to be a completely alien world? Would I feel at home chatting to novelists? But to hear from someone that has that sort of sense of hybrid crossover, I just thought it was fascinating. I don't know how you found it.
Yeah, that idea, I think it was so much I took from that. I think it was that sense. I mean, look, we started at the beginning of that interview about redrafting, just how many times Nick redrafted that over and over and over again. And I think that's one thing we talk about with young people at Young Film Academy is, you've got to accept that there's a new term that I learned recently, sort of draft zero, where you basically, it's not even your first draft, it's your pre-first draft, because those are the hardest ones, where it's just a blank page, but it's just accept it's draft zero, and it's going to be nonsense and rubbish, but at least it's something, and you can shape it from there. And Nick talked about doing 21 drafts of 100,000 words. You just shape it. It's like a sculpture. You just keep shaving bits off, and it won't be brilliant to begin with, but it might be brilliant after 21 drafts. I thought that was super interesting, and I loved this. Yeah, this sense that Nick wrote a novel basically as a giant film script or TV script, but in words. It was like the biggest outline of all time.
Yeah. I mean, especially, novels are, I think you said, 100,000 words sometimes, which is apparently is quite a common approximation for novels traditionally. Like, that's the length that they look for. I think young adult novels is sometimes around 60,000 words. So there are sort of benchmarks and guidelines for that. Whereas obviously film scripts, we just have sort of 110 pages. And anything shorter than that will be an outline. So it's like a rough guide of what happens in each section. But hearing him sort of dissect it that much, which is why when he first said it was 15 pages, I was almost like shocked, because I was like, I've read a lot of books that take a little while to get going, and you're like, oh, where's this going? And you sort of get to like chapter 7, and it's like, oh, interesting. Okay, this is paying off now. Whereas him was like, the hook is happening on page 15. That feels like such a movie script writer's approach to a book, and immediately compelling, right? Like, you're gonna,
and also, but it must have been quite a weird process for Nick to have written this book where the first 15 pages is the world of the feed, and then there's all this other stuff happens with the after the feed goes down, and then they've got to go searching for their child, and then you get the TV production company saying, right, we're going to make the entire first series just about the first 15 pages, and almost you're going, Is there enough there? And so you're watching them kind of add material, sort of almost spin out everything into these long episodes, and they're adding all this new material. And you're like, so I suppose it's that world creating, right? I mean, in part, what Nick did so brilliantly is he created a world that then people can almost add material into that world for their own purposes, the TV show.
100%. But I found that a bit confusing, actually, because I know on The Walking Dead, for instance, I haven't seen it. But that's because I read the comics and I enjoyed the comics, and then I found out that the writer of the comics wanted it to be a forever and ever going serial. And I was like, okay, well, how many issues are that a month? I don't want to commit that for the rest of my life. Like, I'm just a person who likes beginning, middles, and endings. But anyway, So that's why I never watched it. But I know that on The Walking Dead, they blew most of the budget on the first episode. It was like, let's get people in, let's show the apocalypse, and now we're going into the forests. And then we're going to hang out in the forests. Everyone's going to run around in the forests, and everything happens in forests now. And maybe there'll be, if it does well, we can get to the prison stuff. But otherwise, all in forests. It's no more apocalypse, basically. So for them to go, oh, let's take the most expensive section of the book and make a whole series out of that, I was like, no. In my head, I thought they would have gone, that is episode 1. Episode 1 is pages 1 to 15, and then episode 2 through to 10 will be at pages like 15 to 30, like then you start slowing it down. I thought that's just how things were done a bit more, but obviously they wanted to throw resources at this project and make it look expensive. But then it's like, well, what do you do in season 2?
But it's really interesting, isn't it, Dan? We should probably cover this in another episode. Almost this idea that the same story, and you've seen this with loads of famous ones, whether it's Romeo and Juliet or, the story of Avatar, which is kind of like a colonial story that's been told in multiple different formats. But you end up with exactly the same story. And then whether you tell it as a stage play, or whether you tell it as a feature film in the cinema, or whether you tell it as a TV series, or whether you make a computer game, all of those things have totally different structural qualities. So you've almost got, and then it's a question of how do you make that story fit the container, which is what all those different formats are. And it must have been so interesting for Nick to he's written it weirdly, because it is a sort of hybrid. He's written it almost with a film structure, which I think listening to, he was reading Save the Cat, which is kind of less about TV series and more about sort of films. And then it sort of gets put into the structure of a TV series, which means that it gets pulled in out of shape from what he's planned, but then he's got to trust that they're doing good stuff with it. I just thought that was totally fascinating. And then to actually end up as an executive producer on a big show, what a great backdoor in.
100%. I wondered if, when they sent out the email, I meant to ask him whether it was like, would anyone like to option this book? By the way, it comes with a filmmakery producer type that will guide you through the process, although I'm sure some production companies are like, no, we don't want anyone with extra opinions.
Yeah, you know that. What did you make of Nick's phrase, strength in stupidity?
I loved it, and I got it in regard to the helicopter. Just like, why not just ask someone? I'm a serial overthinker, so I'm desperate to underthink things and just ask for things regardless, It's not in my nature, though, traditionally. I'm normally skeptical of doing so. But I like it.
Yeah, I liked it. And I think it rings true, especially for young people. I think that, it is a strength that you have, even though you don't know it as a young person, is that you're not really aware of how difficult things are. So you attempt projects and things, and you try to do things that potentially an older version of yourself wouldn't do, because you find a million reasons why you shouldn't do that, or you might struggle to do that, or it's a challenge to do that. And actually, so that gets in the way often, and that you just need that kind of just like, hell, I'll just go for it and see what happens. Yeah. And even though later that looks like naivety or stupidity, well, that's how a lot of things get done. And the trouble is, at some stage, you get up halfway into the project, you're like, God, this is harder than I thought. But at that stage, you don't give up, right? And you just find a way to make it happen.
Yeah, 100%. And also being young as well helps you out, because you can tell everyone that you're asking favors from that it's a student film. And generally that means people go, oh, okay, they've got no money. It does sometimes mean, oh no, they're going to mess up my carpet, so you can't come in.
Yeah, get out of my
the
house.
reality is everyone messes up your carpet, regardless of whether it's a student film or a high-end production. So if that's your issue, don't let anyone film in your house. But student films don't have resources, so people are more considerate and more generous often. So do let people know that. And I think
I totally agree. And I thought this is a great thing for young filmmakers to pick out, is this sense that, and I think Nick's right about this, that almost everything is, when it starts out, a confidence trick. I mean, I remember a producer sort of talking to me who'd done some amazing producing of kind of the original The Italian Job and Deer Hunter and various things. He was a very famous British producer. And he was talking about, that getting cast members in is just really a confidence trick, because as soon as you cast someone famous in a movie, everyone else sort of believes that the product must be good because that person's in it, even though it might be nonsense. But as soon as you've sort of got them in, you've kind of done a confidence trick. And as Nick says, he's just, everyone starts with nothing. Everyone starts with just an idea. And, you're building it up. So I suppose it is just being about, it's kind of like a version of the thought, fake it till you make it. It's kind of like the other side of that coin, or cousin to that thought, isn't it? And I suppose that when you're a young person, you just think you're doing that, but all you can hear that even when you're Nick Clark Windo, you're going to do the same thing.
100%. And I think where that's sometimes useful, when he was talking about pitching things and, your agents pitching stuff for you, there needs to be a level of confidence that comes with your idea. And the reason that's important is everyone wants to deep down believe that they're just going to gently put their thing in front of someone and someone's going to go, holy moly, do you realize you've written the greatest script of all time? And often that's not what happens. Let's be real. Half the films that go to the Oscars and win the Oscars, would people go and see them if they weren't Oscar nominated? I don't know. I think there's that whole thing is people saying, this is a good film, you should watch this because it's a good film. So when you tell people this is a really good script, this is a really commercial idea, and it's great, people go, oh, okay. And people look at it through that lens. I think be less worried about the script letting them down, because the script's going to let them down regardless if the issue's the script, But if you're just like, oh, maybe, people will go, oh, maybe I'll read it, So I think having that confidence, building the narrative around your piece as well as the piece itself, I think is really, really key.
And I think he was talking about sort of that sense of have confidence in yourself. I mean, what did he say? That thing about kind of almost, how would you act if you believed you were going to succeed? If you just truly thought, well, I'm going to succeed, and you just take that for granted, what would you then? How would you then behave? And as you said, I think you'd chill out and enjoy the ride. And I think that is key and really, really important for young people to remember, is just enjoy this process, whatever it does and wherever it leads to. Because, that's the other thing that I took from Nick, is that Nick's done so many different things. He's trained as an actor. He was a producer. He's written theatre, and he's tried to write novels before this one. And he just opening lots of doors. And actually, as he said, sometimes he thought in his career that he should have been more sort of specific, but actually he now looks back at it and thinks all of that was just feeding where I am now, and has given him so many more strings to his bow, and so many different ways of approaching it. So if you're a young person, just jump out there, right? And get out there, do stuff, do different things, and it's all leading in the right direction.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, so we've got an email that's just been carried in by a messenger pigeon. And this is an email from Jennifer. She is 13, and Jennifer wants to know what not to do when starting writing her screenplay. It just says screenplay. It's not specifying whether it's long or whether it's a short screenplay. So I think there's already some ambition in here, but just sort of like pitfalls to avoid is what she's after.
I think the first thing, Jennifer, I'd say is don't make it too long. I think whatever you're doing, starting out, start out short and get that under your belt first before you try and do anything too long form. Because as Nick said, we call it in the industry heavy lifting. I mean, it's actually once you've written a sort of 110-page script, even if it's just a script, let alone making the thing, just moving the bits around is quite complicated. So start small, literally work with something that's going to be 3 pages long and there's a little masterpiece of of a story in 3 minutes, because we work to about a page a minute. So yeah, I would keep it short, Jennifer. I think that's the key. And I think have fun with it. You might, when you first start writing, whether you're doing a novel or a sort of a screen script, don't have to worry about it getting production necessarily. You might write a load of stuff that no one's ever going to make. And so you can have as many aliens and different planets or whatever you'd want to be, because no one's going to turn around and say, make it. I think at some stage, probably as you get a little older in your teenage years, you might want to think about, can we make this? Can we go out and actually shoot this thing? And therefore you have to have a bit of a producer's brain to go, crikey, actually another planet, that might be quite difficult to do in my backyard. But yeah, start small and so work your way up.
Beautiful. And don't forget, if you've got any more questions, listeners at home, do email them to podcast@youngfilmacademy.co.uk, where we will take a look at them and we will choose our favourites and we will ask them out. And even if they're not our favourites, but they are of value, then we will also ask them out. And even if they're rubbish, we will still read them. So... Thank you very much.
I love it. Guys. Yeah, brilliant. I've really enjoyed that. And do get a copy of the feed if you'd like to see or read kind of Nick's original work, and then check out the TV series. Get it and see how you too might find a back door into the industry.
Excellent. See you guys soon.